everyone, this is update for March 7, 2023, days 377 of the war and of the date update. Well, it's going to be update for both March 6 and 7, just as a side note. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategic situation, strategic events. Probably see it on in the media, online, on TV, that the situation between the US and China is getting worse by day. You probably saw that China was directly warning US that continuation of the current policies where US is blocking China um, trade-wise may lead to the war. And the reason for that is there is a lot of pain that's being inflicted on Chinese economy. So Chinese foreign trade fell by 8% in January through February of this year. So it's probably year on year, with export falling by 6.8% and import by 10.2%. So there's sort of some positive in this, that import fell more. And so China maintains huge positive balance, meaning that the trade is profitable, hugely profitable for China. China earns money, earns capital by this export model, even though the capital then very actively destroyed internally by the Communist Party. But Chinese entrepreneurs are earning a lot of, creating a lot of capital for China, and that engine is being actively derailed. Like 8%, it's a huge number. It's not just one off. It's very significant. What this also means that GDP of 5% is probably going to be out of reach if this continues. So the Chinese growth story or GDP growth story is going to be gone. And just a little bit more information on the US. Export to the US fell by actually 22%, which is huge. You can only imagine this is not normal situation. And import fell only by 5%. 5%. The reason import fell by 5% only is probably because China is getting technological goods that they would like to have anyways. In terms of absolute amounts, it's still also very profitable for China. China earning money by selling to the US. I mean, it's not a secret to anyone that that's extremely profitable trade for China. Again, going back to what I said before. So effectively, what US is doing is destroying Chinese export-oriented business model, which is the main driver of Chinese growth, of all of this huge GDP and so on. Because I'm sure you understand, everybody understands, is that all of the manufacturing from the world has been moved essentially to China, and the world has become extremely dependent on China as effectively the sole manufacturing base. Now the reverse of that is going to be extremely painful, is going to be extremely inflationary. And as I mentioned before, attempt to replace China with India will fail. India will never be replacement for China. They may replace, but at much higher prices. So which also means high inflation in the West, and it's not going anyway anytime soon. And that's a major driver of inflation. It's not just like commodities or the housing, as head of the Federal Reserve was talking to that today in the US. It's basically deglobalization of the world that essentially increases prices everywhere. So there is no way to hide from that. It will affect everybody on this planet in some way, shape, or form. giving this whole situation was extremely confrontational situation with the U.S. Oh, and then one other side note. So this war to happen, it's not going to be over Taiwan. So Taiwan is not going to be. It's just going to be a trigger, maybe. The real war is about the economic dominance and the challenge that China is posing to the U.S. is basically attempt to replace U.S. as sort of the center of the world, and that's really what the war is all about. It's not, um, you know, to defend Taiwan. It's just Taiwan is just going to be, um, you know, the first line of defense. Let's put it this way. The same is true for Ukraine. It's not a war aggression of Russia against Ukraine, which is it is true, and from Ukrainian perspective, that's true. But from a global perspective, this is Russia's attack against the current world order, and this is all coordinated with China and Iran, and there are a bunch of other countries that sort of would support the change of the current sort of the world currently, and I wouldn't be surprised if India were one of those countries, and also Persian Gulf countries probably could be counted there as well. So, anyways, so Chinese president is to visit Russia in March. The rumored date is March 21. This is sort of how to say not 100% confirmed, but the rumors are sort of very strong. Let's put it this way. They're probably extremely valid rumors. Let's put it this way. If that doesn't happen, it would be a big surprise. Then U.S. sort of Parliament is trying to impose more sanctions on the U.S. private investments in China that's related to technological transfer. They probably will be implemented. That's going to be creating another, even more irritation in China and sort of more drive towards the open conflict. As a side note, I want to mention that what China said, what Chinese officials said, is extremely unusual for Chinese culture, where everything is not direct, and it was said in extremely direct, very clear way, which even more highlights the importance of the message. Then in China, in Hong Kong, local politicians are forced to surrender second sort of citizenship, or the surrogate of the citizenship. Basically, they forced to keep just Chinese citizenship. So again, as you can imagine, this is in preparation for the future war, because you want to know who is with you and who is not with you, and sort of kind of like call it like exclude people who are not with you. So it's just very simple logic here. Now let's switch to Russia. I spoke about the Russian state deficit, which was huge. I think it was like 1.8 trillion Russian rubles. Forgot what was that translated into US dollars. It was like 20 something, 24 billion. But anyways, you can just divide by 75. I think that's going to be good enough. And then, so the new numbers came out for both January to February, so it's cumulative number. So it went up to 26 trillion. So just to give you perspective, Russian state budget is the revenues are 26 trillion Russian rubles, and expenses are 29. So the expenses exceed the revenues by 3 trillion, which is in the first place very unusual for Russian state finances, which normally the revenues would exceed expenses. So the state budget is always sort of positive, and because of the war situation flipped. and so it's a negative of 3 trillion. So you can imagine 2.6 trillion just were just in 2 months. So 3 trillion will be blown in March. And if you do run rate for the year, giving this 2.6 trillion, so it's 15, roughly 15.5 trillion deficit. Uh, so as you can imagine, this is um, essentially half of the expenses are not there. So this whole economic and slash financial disaster is uh, going to be unfolding faster and faster at exponential speed for Russia. At the same time, uh, that doesn't mean that there's something is imminent, that the internal unrest is imminent in Russia. Um, it will come, but it will come much, much later. Related to this is just one of the reasons why this is so bad is that natural gas sales are essentially ground to a halt for Russia. So Gazprom sold only um, 1.1 billion worth one sold the natural gas worth of only 1.1 billion US dollars in February to Europe. That's like 3 times less than what they sold in December, just to give you perspective, and probably much, much, much less what they sell normally in 2021. Then there are problems with selling. Sorry. If you remember, I was discussing that Russia is actively selling to um, India, China, uh, Turkey, and so on. And so into India, they sell in rupees, which is Indian currency. So basically, they receive in return rupees, and this all like. And now there is a problem. So Russia has all those rupees, but there's nothing to buy with them because there is nothing of interest to Russia in India relative to amount of rupees they're getting, and they basically stuck with those rupees that they don't need. So essentially, like a free gift uh, to Indian government, to Indian population that Russia is doing, and that's why this is all of this, bureaucrat government directed trade with never works. It's a disaster, and this is a very clear disaster because India doesn't have true currency. Well, I guess it's not money. Let's put it this way. Maybe we can call it currency, but it's not money in a sense of true meaning of the money. I would say even US dollars hardly can be called money, but that's the best surrogate of the money we have, along with the euros. So, um, so as a result, Russia is essentially stuck with all of that, and there's not much they can do. So again, there's a problem there with exporting crude oil and products to India. At the same time, it's extremely profitable for Indian businesses who then resell it to, including US. There's another interesting news is that Russia is going to start selling diesel fuel to Saudi Arabia. As you can imagine, Saudi Arabia has a plenty of diesel fuel, more than they need. And so apparently this is a new scheme, given that India, there's a problem with India with rupees. Apparently, Russia is now selling diesel to Saudi Arabia that will repackage it and then sell it to the rest of the world. And at the same time, there is another interesting news: is that Germany started buying diesel fuel from United Arab Emirates, which is next door to Saudi Arabia. So this probably is the link how it works now. And the same time, Germany declaring that they stop buying energy from Russia. So as you can imagine, that's how it works now. This is just all getting repackaged and sold to Europe to highest bidder, basically. There are you probably seen all of those rumors how the this black sort of fleet of Russian crude oil tankers is reselling that crude oil to whoever wants to take it near Greece and Spain and so on. So again, crude oil is extremely highly liquid commodity. It's close to money as it gets, and so there will never be a problem to sell that. Unlike natural gas, which is extremely difficult to sort of sell. Like it's just by its due to its physical properties, it's not a match to crude oil. Reflecting all of this disaster in Russia, there's a car sales number that came out for February, and it shows that there were only 41,000 cars sold in Russia. I'm talking about the passenger cars, personal cars. Typical number is close to 140,000 based on 2021 numbers. So as you can imagine, how bad it is uh, in um, in that way in Russia. Also, want to mention about the UK. So the energy source, electricity shortage gets so bad that UK had to restart coal power plants. This is again going back to all of these failed energy policies that are sort of like kind of like coming back as boomerangs and hitting. There was I told about the Germany that did that with coal. I think Poland is doing this. UK is now joining it. And by the way, there were secret reports of the shortages of vegetables in the UK, and the reason for that is again failed energy policies where the price of electricity is extremely high. So all of those greenhouses that produce all of those vegetables don't produce them, and so you have shortages. And so this is really how it works. If people think that this is just abstract things and they not gonna affect them, they will hit them hard and extremely hard, and will continue doing that unless those policies are going to be reversed. Now let's switch to Ukraine. Just quick update on Ukrainian power grid. Now everything works. I'm not saying everything is restored. It's extremely damaged, but basically, like Ukrainian sort of repair services, they managed to do this band-aids, so there is electricity everywhere for everyone at this moment. The part of the reason is that business is dead, so there is no essentially consumption from the business, which is the largest actually consumer generally of electricity, uh, not the consumer actually. Um, Even though that's who incentivized to save electricity, but really the savings are to be made on the business side, not on the actual consumer side. But anyway, so that is okay right now. Now let's actually go into the walk through the frontline situation. I will discuss in detail. Well, not in detail. I'll provide more updates on the whole situation around Bakhmut once we get to that area. So the situation along, we're gonna do it in a clockwise fashion. So going starting from the north here, and then we're gonna go down south. So situation along the state border is tense. There are some exchanges of the artillery fires, mostly at sort of I would say, primitive attempts from Ukrainian side to attack something on the Russian side, which is more for just propaganda purposes, and they're not really achieving much in terms of real damage to Russia. Now let's switch to the North Lugansk front line. Things here are pretty much the same, no essential differences. Russian troops continue their attacks. It just happened that, on the 7th there were fewer of those, but essentially situation is the same. Initiative is in Russian hands, and then they essentially try to destroy this bridgeheads on the eastern side of this stream. And that's really essence of the fight right now. There's nothing sort of major happening here. Now let's actually move to the North Donbass, where things are really bad for Ukraine. And so what I said before is Wagner mercenaries are exhausted. And so they don't have any advances for this past 2 days. I mean, you can say, like 100 meters here and there. This is not really advances. This is essentially nothing. They stuck. And there are again complaints from the head of the Wagner Group, Evgeny Prigozhin, that they again not receiving enough shells. So they are on diet. Not on starvation, but on diet, and the diet is pretty hardcore. They also deprived of their ability to recruit from the Russian prisons. So again, they don't have enough soldiers or mercenaries, whatever you call them. And so he even basically issued threats. If this continues, the front line here will crumble, and they will essentially will have to retreat. And as a result, this may lead to sort of cascading effect of disasters on the Russian side, where Ukrainian forces will manage to achieve some strategic victory, not just local, but strategic victory, as basically you open the floodgate here in this area. This is probably exaggeration. He's being over dramatic because he's not receiving obviously what he needs. This is very clear. That's why they stuck. They don't have resource. They don't get resources that they used to get, and they extremely resource, I would say, hungry, wasteful, and so they don't know how to operate in the conditions where they have a lot less resources. So they don't know how to be efficient in other way. And so that's so they also sort of have a strategic problem. They hit strategic wall, and so they cannot achieve anything right now. So the situation right now is kind of like in a balance, but it's unstable balance. It doesn't mean that will continue forever. Somehow this balance will get resolved because the Wagner mercenaries are stretched like a rubber to the max, and that rubber will snap back. And the same is true for Ukrainian side. It's stretched to the max around Bakhmut. It's basically just the will at this point to hold that town, and there are basically there were heavy losses on the among battalion commanders in Ukrainian army. Just today there were 2 from 67th Brigade, I think, and 80th Brigade, and even I think those here. But basically, this is also here just like a salad of all of the units here right now, which again proves that there is a mess on the Ukrainian side. It's completely poorly, I would say, commanded on the Ukrainian side. But nevertheless, their army holds there, especially since they feel that Wagner mercenaries are exhausted. But the cost is extremely high. don't have sort of, I guess estimates would be like 30, 40 dead per day for Ukrainian side. By the way, all of those insane numbers that you hear, like 100, 200,000, whatever, like, well, I guess they usually tends to be like, oh, dead. This is all exaggeration from both sides. There's no, the losses are not that high. They're not low. I'm not saying that everything's great, but they pretty painful for both sides. But they're not those astronomical numbers that you see in the Western media. So the rough estimate for Ukraine is about between 30 to 40 dead per day. Russian side probably incurs something very similar, maybe 50, 60 because they're attacking and so on, but it's not hugely, not that much larger than Ukrainian side. Anyway, so the situation here, so as you can see, there's no really any, advances since March 1st. The only thing that the small update is that essentially Ukrainian side abandoned this eastern bank of the river here. At the same time, Ukrainian side controls the core of the town. However, it's all kind of irrelevant who holds the core or suburbs. The point is that both sides are super exhausted. And as I said before, Russian side does not have enough resources to do the final push. And at the same time, Ukrainian side has enough resources just to barely hold on. So this is sort of this is the dynamic here. So as you can see, essentially there's not huge happening since roughly 23rd, maybe a little bit a few days before. So again, this is the situation. The situation has been stabilized thanks to the this 3rd Brigade and 93rd Brigade, so especially in the south where the 3rd one is operating. But as I said before, the cost of maintaining this situation for Ukrainian side is extremely high in terms of the quality of people who gets sort of lost. Ukraine cannot easily replace those people, while on the Russian side, there is no problem. The quality of people there is not the same, not a match to Ukrainian side. And so from that perspective, this whole situation is definitely strategically not in Ukrainian favor, basically. In the long run, this will lead to the defeat, let's put this way. If things stay the same, they will not, obviously. But if you just primitively extrapolate, this is the end game for Ukrainian side. At the same time, this probably will not stay the same. Now let's look what's going on the central Donbass front line. Things here are more or less the same. Russian troops are attacking everywhere here, regular Russian army, here, this north of Avdiivka, south of Avdiivka, again, the same idea, right? To create this salient and forced withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Avdiivka. This is the key idea here. Then the other area is Marinka, where it's more sort of straightforward, hitting the wall, hitting the head against the wall. Much more primitive approach here, and none of this led so far to any major results for the regular Russian army. Then the last sort of section of the front line is Zaporizhya, and things here are so far quiet. No new attempts to launch any kind of offensive. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and till next time. Bye bye.